Come in, hello.
Do you know what? Let's pull these chairs up.
We're going to get chairs. Yep. I understand that. Now, y'all have to behave being up here on the front row like this.
Well, but they're usually on the front.
I know, but it's like really close. Yeah.
I know they have a legacy to live up.
I should.
All right, hello, good morning, everyone.
I almost gave it a kiss.
One more goal. I've seen all these people go into the chapel. John's did a pickup class for people who aren't as blessed to be in our class. That's it. Yeah. Okay, I forgot to charge my iPad. I've got 10% battery. Hopefully that'll last for an hour. Let me make sure I've closed everything I'm not using, so it's not going to drain. So back to normal today after our dialogue with Jake last week. Hope you enjoyed that change of pace. Always such a delight. I thought we had some difficult lessons in the Gospel of John, but today's I would like almost called in sick because I just don't want to deal with it. It's so complicated, and so there's two ways this can go. We can rush through like an entire chapter's worth of difficult material and just get it over with, or we can have two difficult weeks of lessons, depending on how the flow goes, right? So we're in another one of these sections of the Gospel of John where it's just a whole bunch of red letters. And it's Jesus is giving soliloquies here in this. Now, remember, I've said this before, and I think it's really important to remember, there were no tape recorders, there were no steno pads. Everything we have in the Gospel of John came to us through oral tradition. They got written down. That does not mean it's not true. It likely means it's been smoothed over. And it likely means it has been written 50, 60, 70 years later, right, out of, and even if you can't help yourself to interpret it in light of what you know then. This is really important in today's passage because whoever wrote the Gospel of John, whether it's John or someone else, one of his disciples, they have the benefit of understanding the practical implication of the Lord's Supper, which becomes a relevant part of today's discussion, that might explain how this came to be. So these are all my disclaimers for today's passage. I wish I weren't teaching this lesson, but here I am. I feel as little prepared for this lesson as any I've taught in a long, long time, and it's not for lack of effort. Sometimes you just read and you study and you think, and nothing happens. It's just like the brain, nothing sticks anywhere in your brain, and that's how I felt this week.
Well, maybe your iPad will run out of juice.
Then we'll talk about something else.
Maybe that's what happened to your toupee.
That's it.
No,
I just rubbed it off.
Hey,
Yeah.
Since you say that people wrote it down in an oral tradition, but at some point in the church, early church, they started saying, you can't write it down. It only has to come from us. Do you know when that, from the church?
Well, so that's a bit of a miss. Okay, let me back up. Let's talk about how we got the Bible for again for a moment. Always relative, relevant. I can't even use my vocabulary today. Yeah, and it's a beautiful day. I can't blame the heat. I can't blame the cold. I can't blame the rain. I just blame my old brain.
It's worse.
That's what we always say, right? So, particularly when we're talking about the Gospels, all 4 of the Gospels were written after the fact. And yes, they were written down. That when I talk about oral tradition, I'm talking about the way stories are carried on until they are written down. So when we deal with the Old Testament, oral tradition is even more important because it's a long time that all this Old Testament history is gathered up and then eventually written down by someone. And those are stories that got passed on and passed on and passed on and passed on. What we're dealing with in the Gospels are the stories of Jesus' life and ministry that the early church knew and told over and over and over again, that the disciples knew and told over and over and over again. Maybe you're like me, and I've got, a set of 20 or 30 really good stories I can tell at dinner parties, at other events when people sort of pull my chain. And poor Allison knows all of them. She's like, oh my God, you're not going to tell that one again, are you? Right? I can imagine some of the disciples being around a room, with maybe new Christians and whatever, and some of them say, oh my God, John, you're not going to tell that one again, are you?
But you know how things are that we've seen proven today. I mean, I remember in a classroom, a teacher told one child one thing and told her to pass it all the way through, and it was like nothing like what it started with.
So the challenge is oral tradition can get diluted, confused, interference in it, right? How do we know that that's not the case here? Well, there's a few checks and balances in this system. So one of those is these Gospels are written out of multiple streams of contribution, and they are something that got honed over time by other early Christians. So these documents, once they were written, circulated among the churches. And as an editor and publisher, I will tell you, if someone knows you got something wrong, they are going to tell you right away. Now, it's not like me where I'm just going to make a correction online and boom, it's changed. And you might not ever know it was wrong to begin with. In this case, there are copies of these manuscripts that get circulated, and we can imagine as they're copied that they are amended along the way. And so this is one of the big problems with the view of biblical inerrancy. Sorry to give this sermon again, because biblical inerrancy depends upon what's called the original manuscripts. We don't have any of the original manuscripts. None. Zero. We have copies of copies of copies of copies of copies, right? And so if you want to say, well, the Bible is inerrant the way it was originally written, okay, who's going to argue with you? Because we don't know, right? So when we get to this story of the Gospel of John, and by the way, I scratched my head this week thinking, there was a time when people were handing out little booklets of the Gospel of John as evangelistic tracts. This is the gospel you ought to read. And I'm like, my God, I hope they don't get to chapter 6. They're going to run away. I need an interpreter for this, right? And so what we get in the gospel is the story of Jesus' life and ministry told authentically by people who were there, but who have had some time to think about it. And I will tell you, as someone who is a writer every day of the week, whenever I'm writing about something I've had some time to think about, the outcome is going to be different than if I write something in the moment, right? So as a news reporter, there have been times in my life, many, where I've been at an event and I need to write something immediately that goes out right then. That is a different experience than gathering information, sitting on it, stewing on it for a week or 2 or 3, right? And then writing about it. I have much more perspective and I have time to give it some nuance that otherwise don't. And the Gospels are filled with this kind of reflection period that's brought us together. And that's really evident in today's passages because they are complex, right? And we've got to hear them in light of the author of John trying to remember he's got this ark that he's building of signs. This fits in, and there's themes in here that we talk about: water, bread, all these things. All these things come together again, all right? So rather than me blather on, let's look at the passage. So last week we left Jesus walking on water, right? Well, we got to the other side of the shore. And by the way, I looked up the map of that over the Sea of Galilee and the path that from where they were to where they ended up. I mean, the Sea of Galilee is not huge. And this would have been from east to west across sort of the upper part of the Sea of Galilee. And that's a distance of about 6 miles, just to give you some perspective. So in a boat, I mean, it wouldn't take you a long time to even row across 6 miles.
Where are we?
That's what I was going to ask.
Oh, today?
Yeah.
Yes.
What scripture?
In the Gospel of John. All over. Okay, no, we're in John chapter 6.
6, okay. There.
And we finished the walking on the water business, and now we're at verse 22. Verse 22. Okay? And in typical John fashion, typical gospel fashion, we got turn the slide. Here we are. The next day, the crowd that had stayed on the other side of the sea, where they came from, saw that there had been only one boat there. They also saw that Jesus had not got into the boat with his disciples, but that his disciples had gone away alone. Then some boats from Tiberias came near the place where they had eaten the bread after the Lord had given thanks. So when the crowd saw that neither Jesus nor his disciples were there, they themselves got into the boats and went to Capernaum looking for Jesus. This is like, sorry for this relevant news reference this week, this is like a paparazzi chase. Right?
It is.
When they found him on the other side of the sea, they said to him, a really stupid question, by the way. Rabbi, when did you come here? Like, why is John recording this? Like every stupid thing people say, right? Well, what they're trying to figure out how he escaped them, right? How did he? It's really a question about how as much as when. And Jesus answered them in a really tart way, by the way. Very truly, I tell you, you were looking for me, not because you saw signs, but because you ate your fill of the loaves. Do not work for the food that perishes, but for the food that endures for eternal life, which the Son of Man will give you. For it is on him that God the Father has set his seal. Let's pause for a moment. I think we're just going to take this little by little as we go. So Jesus says, the only reason you're following me is because I fed you. And you want more. But do not work for this kind of... So he flips it into a spiritualized message, right? You're looking for physical food. I'm offering spiritual food. What story does this remind us of that we've already read in the Gospel of John? The woman at the well.
Who is looking for water?
Looking for physical water, Jesus offers eternal water. These people are looking for physical food, bread. Jesus offers eternal bread. So you see in John's writing, this is an intentional parallel. Now, that's not to say Jesus didn't say this. Jesus probably did say this, right? Because this is the teaching method that he's using of taking common objects and needs and turning that into a spiritual lesson. This is a very good rabbinical teaching format, right? This would not be out of the tradition that he was accustomed to.
It has nothing to do with what he says, because you ate your fill of the loaves. It has nothing to do with the fact that there was a miracle involved. in getting that much?
Well, it does have something to do with the fact there's a miracle, because Jesus is saying you're following because you saw a miracle with
Okay,
physical
so-
food. But the physical food, he says, is got to be seen as a marker, as an indicator, as a sign, here we go again, as a sign to a greater spiritual truth. And so Jesus, this is like a children's sermon in church. All right, we have these children's moments, and usually whoever's doing that children's moment brings an object or something, right? And they sit there and they talk about a picture or whatever, right? And that object becomes a lesson for a spiritual truth. Jesus is using the water and soon the wine and now the bread, all as symbols of a spiritual truth. They become icons in a sense, right? Does that make sense? The most important part of verse 27 is the last sentence of it. For it is on him, Jesus, that God the Father has set his seal. Set his seal. Well, so this is language that would not be easily known to us today, because we don't live, unless you're a corporate attorney dealing with a corporate seal, right? You have no idea what this means. But this is a reference like to an important person, particularly a king, who has a seal that when communications are sent from the king to whoever, the writing is folded and the wax is put on it to seal it, and that seal is done with a piece of metal that has an insignia on it, so that you know. Now, some of you may be fancy letter writers and you have seals and wax and all that, right? You may have done that before. That's what this is about. It's saying that God the Father has set his seal upon Jesus as the messenger. So here's Jesus, the letter from God to us, and comes to us with the seal of God on it. This is how we know the message is authentic. And this goes back to what Jesus said in the last chapter as well, about if you've seen the Father, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. That we are the same. And this is a continuation of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Verse 28. Now they ask, there's a structural problem here that's interesting, because they're going to ask a question that has not been prompted by anything Jesus said. They asked him, what must we do to perform the works of God? Can you find anywhere preceding this where Jesus has said anything about performing the works of God? No.
It was their purpose all along.
So what does it mean to perform the works of God? It's interesting to try to figure out what they mean by this, right? And why John deems this important. It seems to me it's most likely just John's way of setting up the answer that Jesus is going to give. This is, at worst, a literary device to get us to the words of Jesus. At most, it's an encapsulation of probably a much larger conversation that people had. Carol Ann?
Do you think they were asking if they could perform miracles?
That's what I think. Because
So-
remember then in the early church, there was that fellow who wanted to buy the ability to perform
Right.
miracles.
So you made bread and fish for us. How can we
Show us how to
we
do
have
it.
our own easy bake oven at home?
Right.
Right? That's one way of reading this. Another way of reading this is that they're asking how they can do the thing God requires of them. So this is the question that the rich young ruler comes to Jesus by night to ask. What must I do to inherit eternal life? And this is the same kind of question these followers of Jesus, and isn't this like all of us? What is it I've got to do to win this thing? What is it I've got to do to get God's favor, right? I think that as much as anything, they're drilling down into the expectations. How do I play this game? How do I do the thing God wants me to do, right? Because we all want to make sure we do the right thing. This is why spooky religion works for so many people, right? Because we're sort of conditioned, some of us, to think that the weirder and spookier stuff is, the more authentic it is, right? And they're looking for a charm, for a formula. They're looking for an answer here, and Jesus is going to give them one they do not like. Jesus answered them, "This is the work of God, that you believe in him who he has sent." Now, I'd like you to think for a moment. If this chapter of John was all we had of the sayings of Jesus, if we had to construct an entire theology of salvation around the 6th chapter of John, it would be entirely about belief and nothing else. Belief. Because the thing Jesus says over and over and over again, not only in the 6th chapter, but throughout the Gospel of John, is you must believe, you must believe, you must believe, you must put your trust in, you must follow. This is the antithesis of the book of James. Faith without works is dead. Or we could say it's the precursor to the book of James, which is a true statement as well, right? Because we know our belief, our teaching is that authentic faith produces works. But the words of Jesus here are all about this act of believing. Right, Jim?
What is the relation in the word that is used here between belief and faith?
Well, they're the same thing.
They're the same.
Right. So the word here means to put your trust in, to
It's
believe
more than
in.
just an intellectual event.
It is. You know, I've used this. Sorry for you old evangelism explosion people like me in the room who grew up with that. Right. I've used this illustration here before, but I'll use it again. It is faith is the confidence that allows you to sit in this chair and believe it's going to hold you up. You entrust yourself when you sit in this chair that it's not going to break and fall to the floor. That requires an act of faith, right? It's a simple way, but there are many ways we demonstrate faith every day. We get in a car and drive somewhere believing the car is going to take us there. We eat food believing it's going to nourish us and not kill us, right? These all are simple acts of faith. And Jesus is saying the same thing here over and over and over again. You got to take that leap of faith. You know, the other classic movie illustration, sorry, I'm just hauling out all the old dogs today, is that scene from the original Indiana Jones movie where, you know, Indy is go through that cave or whatever it is, and he comes up on that ledge. It looks like it's a drop-off, but he's got to keep walking. And he's got to believe there actually is a bridge there he can't see, which of course it turns out there is, right? That's often used as a way of illustrating how our faith works in this. Jim?
But it's interesting that he says that this is a work.
Yeah, that faith is a work. Yeah, the phrasing here is really interesting. This is the work of God, that you believe in him whom he has sent.
But that may have just been an answer to the question, though.
Well, right, this is the structure.
Because they said, what is the work we must do? This is the work you must do.
Yeah, but it's more than that. This is the work of God. Well, if you want to do the work of God, this is the work.
As they said,
Right.
how do we do the works of God? This is the work of God. Just believe.
So let me just reiterate here. It's a good opportunity to get my other agenda in all the time. That the belief Jesus is talking about is not a 15-point doctrinal statement.
No.
This is belief that Jesus is the Son of God, the Messiah. That's it. Everything else is secondary to that. So I don't care what confession of faith you want to cite, what liturgy, what creed, what book, whatever. Everything else is secondary to this essential belief, which is why this is the one thing we ask candidates in the waters of baptism. What is your confession of faith? Jesus Christ is Lord. That's it. We don't ask you to recite the Nicene Creed, the Apostles' Creed, The Baptist Faith and Message, nothing. Right?
Who is he talking to? At this point, is he still talking to this group that
He's still talking to this
paparazzi?
group of people who follow
They
him.
weren't the disciples.
Well, the
so
disciples
much,
were there.
but those are the people who were asking him, just basically town folk.
Yeah. Yeah, the villagers. Yeah. Okay. So they said to him, "What sign are you going to give us then, so that we may see it and believe you?" Oh my God, these people. Right?
Didn't you just see?
What sign are you going to give us then, so that we may see it and believe you? What work are you performing? Our ancestors ate the manna in the wilderness, as it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat. So they're saying, look, I mean, the arrogance of this, but we understand this, right? He just fed them bread and fish that came out of nowhere, and they want more. That's not enough. And then they cite an inferior example of this, in that Moses gave our ancestors manna, which everyone hated. It wasn't as tasty as the bread and the fish, right? That sustained them during that period. They cite that as an example. And what can you do for me today, Jesus? Right? This an attitude we also understand. And Jesus said to them, it sort of puts them in their place. Very truly, I tell you, it was not Moses who gave you the bread from heaven. Notice he says, gave you, meaning you people, right? The bread from heaven, but it is my Father who gives you the true bread from heaven. Again, the manna is a sign, a symbol, a token, an icon, pointing to the bigger reality of this bread of heaven. For the bread of God is that which comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. And so we see here that the whole manna business was not unintentional. That it's part of God's symbolism throughout the redemption of all creation. And then they get religion in verse 34. They said to him, "Sir, give us this bread always." This is a direct quote from the woman at the well. Swap out water for bread. "Sir, give me this water to drink always." She says the very same thing. Okay, this is not coincidental in the way John is telling the story. We've had the water that sustains, we've had the bread that sustains coming along. Are we good so far? Verse 35, the first of the I am sayings in the Gospel of John. I am the bread of life. So Jesus now takes this concept that's been laid out from manna to the feeding of the 5,000, which all relates to the Passover, right? And now brings it to say, I am this bread. I am. It's me. Whoever comes to me will never be hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. So the thirst, they've not talked about thirst. Jesus is bringing the woman at the well into the story at this point, right? But I said to you that you have seen me and yet do not believe. Everything the Father gives me will come to me, and anyone who comes to me, I will never drive away. Underline, boldface, italicize, right here. Anyone who comes to me, I will never drive away. This is yet another place we turn for our doctrine of the eternal security of the believer. That it is not God's will that any should perish, and those who believe in Jesus can never be lost by God's action.
So
Yes.
Jesus is healing the group in the town. People are bringing all the sick people. Hundreds of people all coming around. They're all
Right.
looking to get healed. At one point he says, time to move on. And there are more people trying to be healed.
Yes.
But he walks away.
Yes.
So he didn't drive them away. He just didn't hang around.
Well, he's speaking now of a bigger issue. We're beyond the healing. We're on to the spiritual healing here because he's moved on to a bigger point. That's where they started.
Where's the break?
The break is from object to lesson about the object. The healings are a sign that point to a bigger truth. The physical healings point to spiritual healings, right? And while for the people who are healed and the people who are fed, these are very important things. That's not the primary reason Jesus is doing either of those things. It's to point to the greater truth of God's sustaining grace and God's nourishment and healing. That's the point here. Okay?
Sorry.
No worries.
Was listening on the way in.
Well, it's always good to hear me again.
Yeah. I don't know. You're not the one listening. No, just kidding.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Okay. Everything the Father gives you, never drive away. For I have come down from heaven. Okay, look at this. Manna comes down from heaven. Bread from heaven. Jesus from heaven. I am the bread. It all lines up here, right? For I have come down from heaven not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me. Go back to chapter. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father, and I cannot do anything, right? All that. Verse 39. And this is the will of him who sent me, that I should lose nothing of all he has given me, but raise it up on the last day. This is indeed the will of my Father, that all who see the Son and believe in him may have eternal life, and I will raise them up on the last day. This is an echo of John 3:16. For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have life everlasting. This is more of that, saying, those who believe in me can never be lost. Never be lost. Then the Jews began to complain about him. Remember, we read Jews here as religious leaders, not as all the Jewish people. Because he said, I am the bread that came down from heaven. They were saying, same thing we've heard before, is not this Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How can he now say, I have come down from heaven? Literalists, right? Jesus answered them, do not complain among yourselves. No one can come to me unless drawn by the Father who sent me, and I will raise that person up on the last day. Pause. Score one for the Calvinists, right here. Okay? You know how reluctant I am to give them any points at all. It's like giving a point to Slytherin.
Not quite that bad.
No one can come to me unless drawn by the Father. So here's where this Calvinistic idea comes of irresistible grace, that God draws the elect in, right? Now, I think you have to take this in the larger context. I would say we are all drawn by the Father, not just the elect, but that's a lesson for another day. It is written in the prophets, and they shall all be taught by God. Everyone who has heard and learned from the Father comes to me. This is very dense. Hang on, y'all. Not that anyone has seen the Father except the one who is from God. He has seen them. And Jesus is talking third person again here, right? Very truly, I tell you, whoever believes has eternal life. And once more, in case you missed it, I am the bread of life. Your ancestors ate the manna in the wilderness, and they died. This was an inferior sign. This is the bread that comes down from heaven, so that one may eat of it and not die. Now, a literalist could look at this and say, well, then there must be some physical bread we should all be eating that's going to cause us to have eternal life. Let's find the fountain of youth, or the bread loaf of youth, or whatever, right? But Jesus is speaking metaphorically here, not literally.
Okay, what the heck? He's talking about the Jews wandering in the wilderness?
Yes.
And didn't Jesus give them manna to sustain them?
Well, God gave them manna.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God
But they
gave them-
still died.
But-
It didn't give them eternal life.
So he's saying he gave them manna, and that didn't kill them. It's just that they died.
They died
period.
anyway. Right. But the manna was a temporary fix.
But it sounds like I gave them poison and they died.
No, it sounds like I gave them food for the moment and they lived then, but they didn't live forever.
Okay, so he's saying, hey, I gave them manna. I gave them some sort of physical sustenance, but they still died. But they died.
They lived a natural life anyway.
But it wasn't-
But in comparison, the bread of heaven, you live forever. This is about eternal
Okay.
life.
Okay.
Okay?
But you still die, I mean,
Well, right.
naturally.
Right. So, yeah, there's a fine point on this. I'll quote another passage. Though he died, golly, though he dies, he yet lives.
Yes.
Sorry, King James is tripping me up today. Verse 51, I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Whoever eats of this bread will live forever, and the bread that I will give for the life of the world is my flesh. Now we've taken a dark turn. Okay? The Jews disputed among themselves, the religious leaders, saying, how can this man give us his flesh to eat? So Jesus said to them, very truly I tell you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. Those who eat my flesh and drink my blood have eternal life, and I will raise them up on the last day. For my flesh is the true food, and my blood is the true drink. Those who eat my flesh and drink my blood abide in me, and I in them. This sounds a whole lot like cannibalism.
Yep.
Just as the living Father sent me, and I live because of the Father, so whoever eats me will live because of me. This is the bread that came down from heaven, not like that which your ancestors ate, and they died, but the one who eats this bread will live forever. He said these things while he was teaching in the synagogue at Capernaum. So we've had a strange morph of place here, by the way. Okay, here and then here.
So an observant Jew who's living by the Ten Commandments pre-Jesus, doing exactly what's been revealed to them at the time,
Yeah.
dies and goes to hell.
Well, I don't think that's. Yeah, I've got another answer to that. But that's problematic in this passage, right? Because this only seems to indicate those who come afterward and believe, right? And this is where we get into a ditch.
Isn't that the Southern Baptist stance that the prayers of a
Well, that's the
Jew-
Bailey Smith stance.
Yeah, yeah.
It don't believe anything Bailey Smith said. I made that mistake once. Was baptized the second time. Yeah. Donna?
This part of passage here about drinking the blood and eating the flesh,
Yeah.
this is one of the passages that Roman Catholicism hangs its hat on transubstantiation in the Eucharist
Right.
of the Mass.
So all of this, these teachings of John, hang on one second. These teachings of John, again, have to be read with the understanding that this was written down 50, 60, 70 years later, and there's several decades of practice of the Lord's Supper in the Christian church. And knowing the people who are going to be reading this, like us, have an understanding of communion, or the Eucharist. Now, to Donna's point, this is a passage that leads to the Roman Catholic belief in transubstantiation, which is significantly different than our belief. And that is that based on this and other readings, the wine and the bread physically become the body and blood of Christ, remade. Right? Now you may say, well, that's outlandish.
As you eat it
In
in the Lord's Supper. Yeah.
right. If it's been blessed by an ordained priest who's in good standing and all that. And you may say, well, this is outlandish. okay, you just believed last week that Jesus made bread and fish out of nothing. Why couldn't this be? I don't believe it's true.
But it could be.
But it could be.
God can do whatever he wants.
It could be. My point is, okay, it's not doing me any harm for you to believe that. Right? All right, we have a question over here.
Henry Stone, our verses basically 37 through 58, a transcript of what Jesus said, or are they a testament of what the followers came to believe about him, or maybe a combination of both?
So Henry's asking this question, are these verses a transcript of what Jesus said, or are they what the followers of Jesus came to believe he said? And the answer is both, right? But the word transcript, we got to throw that word out, because there is no way to have a transcript here. Marilyn?
Okay, I was just going to comment on what you were talking about within the Catholic Church.
Yes.
The Lutheran Missouri Synod.
Same thing.
Same thing.
Episcopalian, same thing.
Yeah. So the Episcopalians actually believe in consubstantiation. So there's a difference. So trans, it becomes con, with, right? And so the Lutheran and Presbyterian view of the doctrine of this is a little more muddy and undefined. It's that the physical body and blood of Christ are with the elements, not in the elements.
There's two Lutheran sections.
Oh, right, yeah. You have Lutherans with different beliefs on this, right? Whereas, just for clarity, our Baptist belief on this, and most of the, like any of the non-denominational churches and others in our lowercase b Baptist orbit, right? Congregational governance kind of churches are generally going to believe that the bread and the cup are signs to the reality of Christ. They point us to this. I had an interesting conversation with George one time. We were in worship planning, having this deep conversation about communion. And, having grown up in Oklahoma where we only observed the Lord's Supper once a quarter and on Sunday night.
Oh my goodness.
Because we were afraid someone who wasn't a member of the church would show up. Literally, they would just, do any of you grow up? So the church I grew up in, you would do it on Sunday night, once a quarter, and you would dismiss anyone who was not just in case anyone not worthy was there, they got invited to leave, right, before the service ended. And the other reason we did it once a quarter is we didn't want anyone to suspect we were Catholics, right? So you're not doing it weekly. I very easily said, okay, these are signs and symbols. And George has a position that, okay, maybe I made too light of that, right? That you can be a sign that points to something that's more than just a trivial thing, right? So this, one of my beefs, the residents used to get tired of me saying this, for special services, they're usually the ones who are charged with bringing in the bread. We've had, if you've been here for an intinction service like Christmas Eve and Maundy Thursday and so forth, we've had all sorts of different kinds of bread through the years. And, where I draw the line personally is Hawaiian sweetbread. So the thing that's benefit is it tears off easily. And so if you're thinking pragmatically but I'm like, no, Jesus is not a sweetbread.
Yeah, but you gotta admit, the Hawaiian sweetbread is a whole lot better than those little dried chiclets.
Yeah.
But the dried is supposed to be the unleavened.
Unleavened,
no sin.
yeah. You're not supposed to, it's not supposed to taste good.
Well, it's supposed to be no sin, non-leavened, meaning sin, right? So it's supposed to be.
So let me bring us back around to one other thing before we run out of time. Sorry. Well, there you go. It's about to die anyway. Thank you, Jen.
Swallow your tablet.
So who knows anything about kosher food?
A little bit.
Okay. So what is one of the primary regulations about kosher meat?
It has to be drained of blood.
Drained of blood entirely. There can be no blood in the meat. And here's Jesus talking to a group of Jews about drinking my blood.
Yeah,
This is scandalous.
it is. It's horrible.
This is absolutely scandalous because he's undoing kosher law in this. And that's the thing that we need to understand. His initial hearers in this would have been laying this against what they knew of kosher. And not only is he grotesquely saying, eat my flesh, but he's bringing blood, which, yeah, they've been trained not to do, right? It's verboten. And so Jesus is challenging their entire notion of this. But again, remember, however Jesus said this originally, and I believe Jesus did say this originally, it gets interpreted to us after several decades of practice of the Lord's Supper in the early church. And we today easily read this passage as a commentary on the Eucharist, for good or for ill. Okay, what questions have I left you with? What revelations have you had today?
It seems to me that if we were trying to decide what the Eucharist is really about, then we would go back to Jesus instituting it in the Last Supper.
Right?
And when he gave them the bread and said, this is my body, it clearly wasn't actually his body.
Right.
But he wanted them to think of it that way. And when he gave him the cup, it clearly wasn't his blood.
Yeah, he hadn't just split a vein and poured it into the
But
cup.
he clearly wanted them to think that way.
Right.
And then his commandment was, do this to remember me.
Yes.
Okay, so
Every Lord's Supper table in any Baptist church in America, this do in remembrance of me.
Yes.
Right?
Methodist as well.
Yeah.
And if the point is to remember his suffering and to remember him, then all the other, as you pointed out, whatever it is or isn't, is very secondary.
Right.
The reason for doing it is that Jesus said to do it, and he said to do it to remember that he gave his body and his blood.
All true, and let me just add another layer to that. The Lord's Supper is a reenactment of the Passover meal.
Exactly.
So this goes all the way back to Exodus, right? And it's the adaptation. If you're a novelist and you're writing the Bible, which, by the way, is not a novel, do not hear me say that. It's a collection of books. But if you were creating an arc of a story, the Passover meal becomes the foreshadowing, right?
Yes.
The foreshadowing of what is to happen in the Lord's Supper, in the upper room.
Exactly.
And Jesus is drawing upon that, and we fall in that tradition that unites the whole thing, right? And I will say, for Christians today, the Lord's Supper, and we Baptists call it the Lord's Supper because communion, for a lot of Baptists, implies transubstantiation, right? Communion with, right?
Okay, I'm going to reveal my ignorance. What is transubstantiation?
Transubstantiation is the belief that the bread and the wine become physically the body and blood of Christ.
Okay.
That they are prayed over by the priest, they're blessed, and they become the actual.
Upon taking it, upon intake.
After you've eaten it.
Yeah,
Right.
once you take it.
After it's blessed.
Yeah.
After it's blessed.
It's blessed, but it's
Right.
not. it
There's a
doesn't-
lot of preconditions here.
It's got to reach your mouth first.
No,
Yeah.
it doesn't.
No.
No, it doesn't.
Well-
when the priest blesses it, it literally becomes blood. The bread literally becomes body. And if you notice in the Mass, in the Eucharist part, when everyone has finished partaking, they go up to the altar, they hold their hand, and there's a plate put under there so there's no crumb,
No
anything
crumb lost.
left. And the priest at the end will take the cup that had the wine in it, and he will drink all of it. He'll put water in it, rinse it, drink that.
Right.
He takes the napkin. I've forgotten the formal title of that, but he wipes it very, very clean. Any leftover wafers that are the body,
Right.
they're locked in ciborium,
Yeah.
and they stay locked in there.
Yeah.
That's the body.
Yes, ma'am.
So y'all are just gonna think I'm a heretic, and most of you don't know me, so.
Hey, well, we're a room full of heretics. We like that.
I think communion is when Jesus is in the room. I went and picked up a little boy that was in foster care. He had been abused and abandoned. We went to Sonic and he got this blue gross drink and French fries, and I got a Coke and some French fries, and we ate them together, and I felt Jesus was in the room, and it was communion.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Man, we should go home now.
True.
Yeah, that's past the plate. Or past the French fries. I don't know.
Was there any reason? I'm sorry. Whenever he says, "My body, you got to eat my flesh, drink my blood," and to me, I sit there think immediately, kind of like a Monty Python skit. Not yet. Get back. Don't bite me yet. You know.
It's metaphorical.
Later.
It's all metaphorical.
So if they don't understand it that way, and he gets crucified not too much longer, did they have to worry or be concerned at all about any followers trying to get to his body?
I don't think anyone who heard this originally took it to be literal.
No.
Okay.
Right? No. Except for the religious authorities who are looking for something to use against Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, that maybe it was because they were trying to make, but the fact that people called each other brother and sister and kissed each other, you know, and supposedly those were rumors. Perhaps.
Right. There were rumors. This is one of the knocks against the early church was they're cannibals.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Really?
We are out of time. I'm gonna bring this in. Let's sort of all huddle here. We've been all over the field today, right? With this.
Cannibal.
No, truly, one of the criticisms of the early church was that they are cannibals because of this teaching and because of the observance of the Lord's Supper and these words of Jesus that got. Well, I mean, when you're looking to criticize someone, you find every weapon you can.
Yeah. Is that in the Bible somewhere? They ate each other. I mean, where's that from?
No, it's in the tradition. Oh, well, it is. Yeah. Okay.
No, not in Romans, but the Roman Empire.
Right. No, we know this historically.
Yeah.
We know this historically, not through the Bible. Right. Okay.
And there's more to come next week in the same chapter.
God help us. Well, we made it through. We made it through today. Let me just close by saying this. Communion, the Lord's Supper, the Eucharist, whatever you want to call it, people experience it in different ways and at different times of their life. And one of the challenges, I think, is for us to allow space for people to have their own experiences in these moments. For some people, they need this every week. It is a spiritual nourishment that they choose to avail themselves of. For others of us, it's almost an afterthought. It's something that we do because we showed up at church on that Sunday, right? And that runs the gamut. But I would also say there are different times in our lives when that becomes more meaningful to us than others. I've written about this before. Sometimes the Lord's Supper becomes a healing balm for us, like medicine that we need in our bodies. And other times we're much more carefree about it, right? And one of the challenges of our Baptist tradition is that it's very easy to make light of the Lord's Supper because we've so de-emphasized it. One of the dangers of some other traditions is they've so overemphasized it that it becomes everything. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. But all of it's rooted in these passages that we read today from John's Gospel. So there you have it. Let's pray, and then Charlene will come with our other concerns. God, please continue to teach us and help us to understand anew your words, challenging though they are, and help us to be nourished by your Spirit among us, we pray, through Jesus Christ. Amen.
And church picnic